midterm election is over, and the Republicans lost 28 seats. That means the Democrats have 223, which would give them the 218 that they needed to control the House of Representatives. Republicans 201 seats. The phrase "Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi" is just not good. It's pretty nauseating. We're with Tim Loggins with the Patriots VAC 746. Hey, Tim.
Good morning, Paul. I'll go one that's even worse than that. Maxine Waters as the chairman of the finance.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
It's gonna be a rough 2 years. Rough 2 years. Some good talk radio content though.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, but the Senate, 100%, the Senate more conservative.
Absolutely. It's a great victory for our country and for Trump. It's a lot more conservative. We lost Jeff Flake, of course, John McCain. We're in a lot better shape on if the Supreme Court has another nomination coming up. We're in a good position in the Senate.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little. First of all, folks, the Patriots VAC 746. If you want to know more, you go to Facebook.com. You search for Patriots VAC 746. Ask to be a member of the group, the online sensation today. They're on a mission to educate the citizens of Arkansas about your gun rights. We recently had a lot of victories. A judge essentially referenced what the Patriots have been saying for a long time in a case, a Fourth Amendment case. And basically said that you don't need a permit or a permission slip from the government to carry a weapon in this state, open or concealed. It was a huge victory.
Absolutely. It was, it needs to be a state holiday. October 18th, let's celebrate it.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is there was an arrest recently in Forest City, Arkansas, where, well, you tell me what happened, Tim.
Pretty long story, Paul. There was a guy that was kind of harassed in Forest City in a grocery store about a month ago. An off-duty officer that was a security guard came up to him and saw that he was carrying openly and said, "Let me see your permit." And the gentleman explained to the officer, "I don't need a permit in Arkansas," and he explained the law to him. And the officer didn't want to hear it and said, "You can carry your weapon back out to the store, or you can leave, or I'm going to cite you." The guy was finished anyway. He left the store. A month later, and it was actually November 1st, he was in a different store, in the dollar store, trying to get some Halloween candy for his kids because the storm had messed up trick-or-treating. Same off-duty officer, apparently has multiple jobs as a security guard, came up to him and said, "Hey, let me see your permit for that weapon." And he said, "Look, we've already had this conversation. I don't need a permit. Arkansas's constitutional carry. I'm open carrying. You don't have a permit for open carry." The officer told him he was going to cite him, and the gentleman said, "Look, man, let's get your boss up here. We need to clear this up." So the gentleman called the police department and said, "Hey, you got one of your off-duty officers that's harassing me here at the Fred's Dollar Store. Can you please come up here?" I understand that multiple officers showed up. When they arrived, the gentleman began telling the officers, the lieutenant in particular, what was going on. The lieutenant said, "Hey, let me see that pistol." Gentleman unholstered it and handed it to the lieutenant, and he said, "Hey, it's hot now." The lieutenant said, "Oh, it's hot? Well, I'm going to have to confiscate this weapon because since it's loaded, that's an indication that you intend to kill someone with it."
Oh, wow. Okay. So they're liars. So this is what gives law enforcement a bad name.
Paul, it's even worse than that because when they charged him, carrying a weapon charge is 573-120. They charged him on the citation for 573-121. Which is a repealed knife statute that was repealed 7-8 years ago. So they didn't even get the charge right. But their contention is that you have to have a permit in Forest City to carry a weapon openly. They're not even talking about concealed. So in other words, you must have a permit, period, to have a weapon. That's just not what the law says. There's been some obstruction down there. They denied our Freedom of Information request.
Okay.
Which is a violation of the law.
Another violation of the law. So we have law enforcement in Forest City that apparently are tyrants, is what it's.
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, Joe, can you, in just a second, I left that book right there so if you could walk it around to me, because I want to show it to the audience. Folks, welcome to the program. You've found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Thank you, sir. We want you to be a part of the program. One of the ways you can do that is to call us or text us. The number is 870-275-9799. You can sound off on the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Conduit News, or go to the YouTube channel. Please go to the YouTube channel. Subscribe. Click the little bell to receive notifications as well. All right, so, wow. A lot happened. A lot happened since we signed off, nationally speaking. Good grief. Did anybody see that press conference? So we have this fiery press conference and a massively hostile press. I mean, I'm telling you, folks, just unbelievable how hostile the press was. I actually listened to most of this press conference with the president. And once they settled down, once he got about 45 minutes in, it really is a treat to listen to him get into issues and talk about things, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's potential deals that'll be made, that he's involved in. I guess what did they talk a little bit about North Korea? They talked a little bit about. Did they talk about the natural gas deal with Russia? It seems like maybe I just saw that headline and I'm getting confused. Anyway. It's really refreshing when you actually hear him, attempt to answer. Then, of course, you get these other questions about how, aren't you a racist, sir? Aren't you a white nationalist, sir? You said you're a nationalist. And he says, I'm just not a globalist. That's what it means. I think we got to straighten our own country out first before we can love and help the rest of the world. I mean, it was great. It was great. So that happened. Then, of course, you have right after that, the firing of Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, which sent the left into really just a sky-is-falling mentality, a Chicken Little mentality, okay? Then at the same time, we have reports now, just so you know, we have reports now that there were mobs outside of Tucker Carlson's house of Fox News threatening him. We know where you sleep at night. We have Antifa that has reemerged, publishing an address to Ann Coulter. I'm sorry, no, publishing the addresses of Ann Coulter and Sean Hannity and more. So this is interesting because, the Democrats won the House. They didn't do so hot in the Senate. Did you hear that Joy Behar of The View said that the Republicans won the Senate because of gerrymandering? Wow, what a dopey statement to make. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The Republicans have gerrymandered the states, the state boundaries, and that's why they won the Senate races. Way to go, Joy Behar. Way to go. You just keep informing the ignorant masses of the left who continue to watch your show and applaud every time you say something negative or derogatory towards a conservative or the president. What I find interesting about this whole situation over the last 24 hours is that, the Democrats didn't even have time to brag about winning the House. They didn't, and I posted this on my personal Facebook page. I said this. Democrats win the House and don't get any time to brag because of Sessions' resignation. Did I say firing earlier? The resignation of Sessions. It doesn't really matter. So now the Democrats are outraged about the integrity of the Mueller investigation and are rushing to podiums across the country to tell America about Trump and Russia collusion. Welcome to America for the next 2 years, ladies and gentlemen. But don't you understand? And I think there were even some exit polls to back this up. There were some exit polls that suggested that the American people were pretty much sick of the Russia collusion thing. And so whether it was intentional or not, there are many people that believe that, Trump plays 4D chess and that this was calculated. Let's get rid of Sessions now. Let's change the news cycle. The Democrats don't get to brag, and they immediately start reminding the country that they are divisive, and they're trying to convince you that Donald Trump won the election in 2016 because he was a KGB agent. And that doesn't set too well with the American people. So we are already in a process. We're already in a process where the American people are going to see, the Mueller investigation, blah, 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 blah. I got to tell you, our country is in for a lot of unrest in the next 2 years. Do you know what? Everybody knew what was going on in the Kavanaugh hearings. You remember this? Even people on the left knew, but to them the ends justify the means because they want a progressive court, because they don't get any legislative victories. They mostly get judicial overreach, and that's how they get their policies enacted. So we are going, but you understand how transparent it was what was going on? How they were going out, they were fishing, they were laying these nets, they were laying these snares. They weren't even trying to hide it. They weren't even trying to lay these snares in secret with the Kavanaugh confirmations, right? It was just blatant. Hey, we're going to define whatever the moral outrage is supposed to be for the day or the next couple of weeks, and then we're not going to really care about like Juanita Broderick or anybody else. Like, this is just going to serve our purpose for the meantime as an attempt to maintain control over the United States Supreme Court. We are in for that type of environment, I really believe, for the next 2 years. I mean, it's entirely possible that when Donald Trump yesterday in his press conference, he said, hey, look, we'll attempt to get things done. We'll attempt to work across the aisle and that sort of thing. But then, of course, he tweeted out, listen, if you're going to waste all this money investigating me and my family, then we've got the Senate. We can just investigate you as well. Turnaround is fair play in this regard. Of course, the media sees that as, somehow only a one-sided threat. When we've had Maxine Waters and everybody else talking about impeachment for the last year. We are in for a lot of unrest in this country. This marks a time of unrest. It's not only divided government. It's just, again, I really believe that. And I guess, I was worried about the left getting more and more violent, more and more mob-like if the Republicans won the House or kept the House. And there's really no way to test that theory because it didn't happen. So we can't test something that didn't happen. But there was other people that I was talking to that said, no, if they win the House, if the Democrats win the House, they're going to go even further. They're going to double down. They're going to become even more violent. And so far, that certainly appears to be the case with the mobs outside of Tucker Carlson's home. And as combative as that press conference was, I mean, that press conference was super combative yesterday. Matter of fact, the biggest headline out of that, which is also taking away from the fact the Democrats won the House, is the interaction between Jim Acosta of CNN, who's now had his press credentials revoked, thank goodness. And it's and you might say, Paul, you're a journalist. Why would you? Well, because when you act like a disrespectful person to the President of the United States, and you're putting your hands on a White House staffer who's trying to get the microphone away from you to get it to another reporter, that's inappropriate. That's just not professional conduct if you're a journalist, right? I mean, if you're if you're a journalist and the president says enough, and there's a certain level of aggression, if you're asking a question of a leader, whether it's the governor or something like that. But if they move on, you move on. It's the executive of your government. So, show a little respect. But see, the left engages the right now, assuming that they're already a better person than those on the right. But that's how they engage. They don't engage as equals. The left asks Donald Trump questions. The leftist press asks Donald Trump questions, and the premise is, I'm a better person than you, sir. You don't deserve to be here. Matter of fact, we talked a little bit about that at the end of the interview. I got to record an interview yesterday. Wait for it. With Mr. Jay Cost. That's right. We're going to play it at 7 o'clock today. Oh, there it is. I'm covering up the name. So he's an author of a book called A Republic No More, but he's the author of a bunch of books. We talked about a newer one. And so he's going to be on the program today at 7. Mr. Jay Cost, excited to have him on. It was fun to get to talk to him. He's contributor for National Review Online and bunch of other stuff. You've seen him. He's a historian, conservative. Great to talk to him. Anyway, so we'll be talking to him. All right, let's get to this press conference, shall we? Here it is. Jim Acosta, President Donald Trump. It sounded like this.
And so then, wait a minute. Then the follow-up.
You heard my answer. Go ahead.
Well, since it's Jim, I'll let it go.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to challenge you on one of the statements that you made in the tail end of the campaign. In the midterms.
Here we go.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, that this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, the caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
But do you think that you demonized immigrants
in
this election
to try to keep them? I want them to come into the country, but they have to come in legally. They have to come in, Jim, through a process. I want it to be a process, and I want people to come in, and we need the people.
Your campaign.
Wait. You know why we need the people, don't you? Because we have hundreds of companies moving in. We need the people.
Right. But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. Right. These were people. This was an actual, it happened a few days ago. And
they're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President,
that's
enough. I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am.
Mr. President, that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
So he steps away from the podium here.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts his butt.
Well, I'm not
like
a big
the rest
fan
of
of yours either. So
I understand.
To be honest.
So let me ask you a question if I can.
All right, stop.
You repeatedly
stop.
said
you aren't the best.
Right, stop, because we got to get to there's a little bit more after this. All right, but you notice the part where he says, "Excuse me, ma'am." That Jim Acosta says, "Excuse me, ma'am." I believe that's the moment where the White House intern is attempting to take the microphone from him, and he doesn't like it. And so Wednesday evening, CNN was suspended, or at least Jim Acosta was suspended. President Trump believes in a free press. Here's a statement, and expects and welcomes tough questions of him and his administration. We will, however, never tolerate a reporter placing his hands on a young woman trying to do her job as a White House intern. That, according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This conduct is absolutely unacceptable. It is also completely disrespectful to the reporter's colleagues not to allow them an opportunity to ask a question. She continued, President Trump has given the press more access than any president in history, Contrary to CNN's assertions, there is no greater demonstration of the president's support for a free press than the event he held today. I mean, it was an hour and a half. I mean, him just fielding questions from obscure news outlets. And by the way, the press always gets upset about how he doesn't have his, press conferences like this. Well, when he does, first of all, they're fantastic, gives a lot of people access. But number two, he always stops and talks to the press when he's getting in and out of Marine One, getting in and out of the helicopter. He always stops and talks to the press. President Obama didn't. He would just, he wouldn't answer questions, just get right on the helicopter. The statement goes on. Excuse me. Only they would attack. Excuse me. This morning, I'm trying to fight off a little sickness here. Only they would attack the president for not being supportive of a free press in the midst of him taking 68 questions from 35 different reporters over the course of an hour and a half, including several from the reporter in question. The fact that CNN is proud of the way their employee behaved is not only disgusting, it's an example of their outrageous disregard for everyone, including young women who work in this administration. As a result of today's incident, the White House is suspending the hard pass of the reporter involved until further notice. So go ahead, Joe, hit play.
Mr. President, you repeatedly, over the course of the...
Okay, just sit down, please. Well, when you report fake news, when you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
Mr. President, over the course of the last several days of the campaign, sir, at the end of the campaign, you repeatedly said that Americans need to fear Democrats. You said Democrats would unleash a wave of violent crime that endangers families everywhere. Why are you pitting Americans? Why are you pitting Americans against one another, sir?
Peter, what are you trying to be?
Obama never got that question.
Let me just tell you.
Obama never got that question.
Because they're very weak on crime. Because they have often suggested, members and people within the Democrat Party at a high level have suggested getting rid of ICE, getting rid of law enforcement. That's not going to happen, okay? We want to be strong on the borders. We want to be strong on law enforcement, and I want to cherish ICE because ICE does a fantastic job.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to reset here, folks. We're going to have more of this coming your way, and don't forget. So we'll be talking with Mr. Jay Cost who's an author, conservative historian. Coming up at 7, then Mr. Dan Perkins, another author, by the way. We'll be talking to him at 7:33 about the motives of people surrounding, just the motives of everybody when it comes to these midterms and how everything is shaking out. I mean, it's quite fascinating. Again, the Democrats, they barely get a chance to brag about taking the House. Now they're reminding everybody about Russia collusion because Jeff Sessions resigned yesterday. It's pretty interesting times we're living in. We got to take a break. Back in a minute. Sounds like to me.
Well, I'm gonna speculate a little bit, and I hate doing that. Not really.
Yeah.
I know on Forest City website we've had interactions with them before, and I say we patriots. They post that they hold concealed carry classes on their Facebook page, which to me is a violation of the law. They're profiting from their position as police officers. They have a vested interest because they're making money providing that training, and now they're telling citizens, basically strong-arming them, take my class or we're going to arrest you. Mm-hmm. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, wow.
And, last time I was on, Paul, we talked about a citizens commission so that normal folks, have some kind of avenue to address these limited officers, these rogue officers.
Yeah, little pockets, yeah.
And the vast majority of law enforcement's not a rogue. They're doing the right thing, doing a hard job, doing a good job. But you got these incidents that come up, like the Walnut Ridge deal, Kirby Ward and Greenbrier. There's pockets of officers that aren't following the law. And
in Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
So we have also another update that's happened, since we signed off at 8 o'clock yesterday, which is just, this is a tragedy. Over in California, at a bar, a gunman killed 13 yesterday. They had this, apparently the bar has a promotional where they do something called College Country Night. This happened in Ventura County. Sergeant Eric Buskow says the gunman's dead inside a Southern California bar where 11 people were injured. We now know that 13 are dead. The latest update, sheriff says 13 people are dead, including a sheriff sergeant and the gunman, after the shooting inside a crowded Southern California bar late Wednesday. Ventura County Sheriff Jeff Dean says Sheriff's Sergeant Ron Hellis responded to the scene and was shot after he entered the building. He died at the hospital early Thursday morning. Authorities did not say how the gunman died. Dean says around 10 other people were shot and wounded. No other information on the victims was immediately known. Ventura County Sheriff's Office Captain said the first reports of shots fired came around 11:20 at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, which is about 40 miles west of Los Angeles. So, folks, you got to wonder this. You got to assume it's a gun-free zone, number one. But of course, we're going to hear the usual arguments from the usual suspects. There's no word yet on what kind of gun was used. I have a statement here. I saw this on Facebook before we came on the air about this incident from our friend at Patriots Vec 746, Mr. Tim Loggins. He writes, prayers for the Thousand Oaks victims of mass murder. When will people realize that all of these shootings have a common denominator? They happen in gun-free zones. A bad guy walks into a shooting gallery where he knows no one can shoot back. Police response was great. 3 minutes from the 911 call, the first hero on the scene did his duty and charged the sound of bullets and died. 13 people ultimately paid the price of disarmament with their lives. Only you are responsible for protecting you. Stay armed, stay vigilant. Madness cannot be legislated, but it can be stopped with a bullet. Very well said. Our thoughts and our prayers are with our countrymen in California who are going through this terrible, terrible tragedy. I know. Whether they want them or not. People are going to, what are you laughing at? Our thoughts and our prayers are with them, whether they want them or not. Yeah, a lot of people on the left, they get offended now when you say our thoughts and prayers after an incident like this. Back in a minute.
Citizens have no recourse other than to hire an attorney and sue.
Yeah.
And there needs to be something we can do. And by the way, Forest City's wrong. This is just, I mean, I've never heard that you got to have a permit to open carry. Even our governor said open carry is legal.
Yeah.
The attorney general said it. I'm just shaking my head on it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, what I think is going to happen is you're going to have the normal. First of all, they're going to waste the citizens' time.
Absolutely.
And that's the worst part about this. But eventually, they're going to have to some judge somewhere or the prosecutor will drop the charges and tell the police officers that they're morons. I hope they're listening. That they're morons, and you know, but a citizen's time will be wasted here. So
well, and he's not going to be convicted. That's
exactly
he
right.
can't be convicted.
They don't even have the right charge.
The Taft case confirmed that. You got to have the unlawful intent to use the weapon against a person, whether it's open or concealed.
Yeah.
The law is very clear on that. 573-120 is very clear. So they're wasting time making a false charge, and I think they're doing it for monetary reasons in Forest City. They're literally making money off of the classes while they're police officers, and they're advertising that on their Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go on their Facebook page, guys, and you make a comment about that, they delete your comments, obviously.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about it.
You also just go to the if there's any trolls out there and you got to get your troll fix on today, maybe you're upset that the Republicans lost the House, head on over to the Forest City police Facebook page and tell them that they've made a mistake.
Paul, and I would love to say they made a mistake. This is not a mistake. The incident in Walnut Ridge was not a mistake. That was police overreach. And that's what we're really dealing with is there's instances around this state where bad officers are fostering, I don't know, distrust of police.
Yeah.
And the majority of officers are doing a good job, but you've got these isolated incidents that continue to happen, and we don't have a route to address it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a shame, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. We should have a good relationship with law enforcement.
We're talking with Tim Loggins. Tim is with the Patriots Vec 746. Again, you can find him on Facebook. So I want to get to some election numbers here in a minute across Arkansas. Really, really interesting stuff. But before I do, I have to remind everybody that coming up this January is the legislative session, and there are a lot of people that think that our government may try to pass red flag legislation where you can confiscate somebody's guns just over an accusation, violating just a ton of rights.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Again, at phone number 870-275-9799. The Democrats win the House 2 days ago. They don't get any time to brag because now they're talking about Russia collusions because of Sessions' resignation. They're outraged. They got to protect the integrity. The Democrat National Committee chairperson Perez says that Trump firing Sessions and appointing the deputy Attorney General Whitaker is worse than Watergate. Nice. This is the party of reason here. Worse than Watergate. So let's talk real quick. Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker wrote back in 2017 that the Mueller investigation was going too far. Sessions had recused himself from overseeing the investigation due to his role on the Trump campaign. Whitaker, however, would not have the same issue. The Justice Department on Wednesday indicated that Whitaker would indeed supervise the Mueller investigation. The acting attorney general is in charge of all matters under the purview of the Department of Justice, according to the Department of Justice spokeswoman Sarah Isgur. That's what she told Breitbart News in an email. And this has got the left just completely in a meltdown. I mean, what did you expect? At what point does the Trump administration get to say, well, I'm the executive in the Constitution. Like, I'm the exec, and this is the Justice Department. This is my agency. This is my organization here. I mean, at what point does the minority Senate, Chuck Schumer representing the minority, the minority Democrat Senate, at what point in this country do they think they somehow have a right to the political motivations of the Justice Department? Now, I know the Justice Department is supposed to be apolitical, but if you think the Mueller investigation has been apolitical and nonpartisan when it's a bunch of Democrats he hired to do all of this investigative work, and they haven't found 1 ounce of Russia collusion, and you know they haven't, because if they had, it would have been leaked and we would have known well before the midterms. So this is ridiculous. You know, for people to say, well, President Trump's trying to politicize the Justice Department, or this is worse than Watergate, or he's trying to cover. Do you really believe that the Mueller investigation has been nonpartisan and has just been, we're trying to apply, when they're going after people a part of the Trump campaign that had nothing to do with Russia collusion, but instead they're getting somebody on tax fraud from 20 years ago before they were even associated with it? They're just trying to collect some scalps here? You really think that when it was supposed to be about Donald Trump secretly being some sort of KGB agent and coordinating with the Russian government about trying to get dirt on Hillary Clinton's emails and blah, blah, blah? You know, we've had Arkansas's Rick Crawford, Congressman Rick Crawford, on, who is on the House Intel Committee, and says they didn't find Russia collusion with the Trump campaign, but they did find it with the Clintons and the Democrats. You know, but of course, to say that's not a mainstream thing to say. In terms of the media, just completely ignores that. So it's about time. It's about time we stop the charade. We quit trying to pretend somehow that the Mueller investigation is somehow above board and not a partisan act. And who knows? Maybe it is in some instances. But at this point, the Senate, the minority. Listen, it's Donald Trump's call. It's his agency, period. And that's just the way the law works. It's the way our Constitution works. He's the President of the United States. He's the executive. I noticed Mitt Romney, by the way, the new senator from Utah, is not disappointing. He gave a press conference and or gave a tweet or something and said, we've got to protect the Mueller investigation. Okay, all right. Why? At this point, he needs to submit what he's got, and let's move on. If he's got something, fine. But he needs to, put a report out or whatever. That's what I think. Folks, the telephone number is 870-275-9799. It's 870-275-9799. Joe, will you throw this up there, this article? So Foxconn, they're a Taiwan-based electronics manufacturer, Foxconn. And Wisconsin, by the way, Scott Walker failed to get a third term. That's unfortunate. Wisconsin gave a giant incentive package worth billions of dollars to Foxconn so that they'll put a plant in Wisconsin. Only problem is they're having trouble getting workers for the plant. And so there was a report which Foxconn denies. But the report said that they're going to be importing Chinese immigrants to work at the factory. Taiwan-based electronics manufacturer Foxconn is struggling to find enough skilled workers for its planned facility in Wisconsin and may bring in personnel from China, according to the Wall Street Journal. The report said Foxconn, which makes devices and components for Apple and other tech firms, is facing a tight labor market for the manufacturing plant, which is getting some $3 billion in incentives from Wisconsin. The company has pledged to hire 13,000 workers at its southern Wisconsin site, but some reports say the total may be lower as Foxconn scales back its initial plans. The groundbreaking for the plant was attended in June by U.S. President Donald Trump, who claimed credit for the decision by the company to locate the plant in the United States. So we have a situation here where, now Foxconn came out and denied this. We're not going to bring in Chinese immigrants. The reason this is so relevant is, speaking of Rick Crawford, by the way, congratulations to Rick for winning a re-election. we had Rick Crawford in, and we were talking about China. And I told him, or I asked him, is China a threat? And he said absolutely. And he went on to list the reasons why. And one of the things he said was that in many of these cases where China, which is listed as a developing nation under the World Trade Organization rules, and yet somehow has the money as a developing nation to invest all of this money overseas and putting up businesses and things in America as well as other places, is that eventually they do import Chinese workers, to staff the plant, and how that's not good, especially with the intellectual property theft going on and the kind of closed off communities, little pockets that result of this. That it's not what it appears to be. Now, Foxconn is a Taiwan-based company, but the same thing applies here. Obviously, right? I mean, it's not a stretch. The same concept applies. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to go make any country in the region? And why are we talking about Chinese workers? Well, that's because they've got people there that are willing to move here. And meanwhile, here in Arkansas, according to Talk Business and Politics, our Arkansas Economic Development Commission is constantly reaching out to China in the midst of this trade war that we're in, trying to make sure these deals where we're giving incentive packages to the Chinese, local incentive packages, as well as the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, trying to get them to come in here and open up Chinese communist businesses here in America. And it just doesn't make any sense. So I wanted to highlight this, that Wisconsin taxpayers may very well be, if this report is true, I know Foxconn denies it, but you understand Wisconsin taxpayers paying for Chinese immigrants to move here to take jobs in their own state? Doesn't that appear just a little bit strange to some people out there? Doesn't it appear a little bit, counterintuitive? Phone number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799 if you would like to text or call the program. Going over here to the Facebook page. I want to remind everybody, I'm going to be at Larry's Pizza today at 12 o'clock in Conway. So in Faulkner County, you've got the Faulkner County Tea Party Luncheon. That happens. What is it? Does it happen once a week, every Thursday, at Larry's Pizza? Yeah. So I'm going to be there. I guess I was there last quarter. I'm trying to go every quarter, and so I'm going to be speaking to the great crowd there, which is always extremely well organized. I just got a text message. Taiwan companies dislike China control. Also, I would expect, not the deal with Arkansas companies. That's a good point. Let's see here. Randy on Facebook writes, Paul, what was the Arkansas shift of power in the House and Senate this election? Well, it's still a Republican supermajority, but if you go over to conduitnews.com, there's a comprehensive story about this, which would answer your questions if you want to know specifics about what happened in Arkansas. The slight correction from yesterday, by the way, it looks like Democrat Chris Ritchie pulled it out. Now, Michael John Gray still losing narrowly, the Democrat chairman, which is a huge get. But Democrat Chris Ritchie, we were reporting based on Secretary of State numbers that he had lost yesterday to Republican challenger Jason Dobson. But I was told yesterday that when the Helena vote came in, it put Democrat incumbent Chris Ritchie back on top. So it looks like he's going to be maintaining that seat. But right now, right on the front page there, Conduit News, you can click on that full Arkansas 2018 midterm election results. And I'll go ahead and post this to the Facebook thread that we're on right now for Randy or others if you want to get a look at it. But the official results from the Arkansas Secretary of State's office, with 99% of precincts reporting. Voter turnout was 49%, with over 874,000 votes cast. There were little surprises in Arkansas with just 4 incumbents being defeated, all in the State House of Representatives. Incumbent State Representative Michael John Gray, who is the Democrat Party chair, was defeated by Republican challenger Craig Christensen by just under 100 votes, and or about 1 point. Moderate Republican Charlie Collins was defeated by 10 points by Democrat Denise Garner in East Fayetteville. Democrat State Representative Scott Baltz was narrowly defeated by about 100 votes, or 1.5 points, by Republican Marsh Davis. And perhaps the most shocking result in the State House, Republican State Representative Jeff Williams of Springdale was defeated by just 30 votes by Democrat Megan Godfrey, with very low turnout in that district. With these results, Arkansas will look exactly the same, with the Republican Party holding all constitutional offices, all congressional seats, and the same supermajorities in the State House and State Senate. So that answers your question, Randy. It's right up there on the front page right now at conduitnews.com. You know, interestingly enough, I've had several people tell me that they are very surprised at the loss of Charlie Collins from the State House. And, you know, Charlie Collins, I believe he got elected in 2010 and ran and talked like a very hard-line conservative candidate. I mentioned to you yesterday that Charlie Collins was a leader in the movement to partner with the Democrats. This would have been in 2013, but it would have started in 2012, like late December. That's when they started to hatch this plan. You see, Arkansas had a Democrat governor. We had a very thin majority coming up in the House chamber. Barely enough, Republicans to come a majority. So all the Republicans had to stick together. Well, they elected Republican Speaker Davy Carter with the Democrat support and some Republican support. And it was a mutiny. And that was, interesting, to say the least. It was outrageous at the time. I mean, I remember I couldn't believe what had happened. But that was the influence that Democrat Governor Mike Beebe had. Love him or hate him. I mean, that's why that was able to happen. So you have a situation where, if you look through the years, from what I can tell, State Representative Charlie Collins deviated more and more from the right to the left direction. Very, very moderate. I mean, when Conduit News says here that he was a moderate Republican, that is exactly true. But he didn't start out that way. He kind of slowly shift, and eventually we talked about his gun bill. Now, he got a lot of flack from the left on his gun bill, but I mean, essentially, what started out as just leaving the same amount of red tape alone and allowing people on college campuses to carry, if they had one of those permission slips, ended up being a bill that allowed U of A to get out of the requirements if they wanted to. It ended up being a bill where it really didn't do what it was set out to do. And anyway, here we are. State Representative Charlie Collins ends up losing it. The question here is, is there a lesson to be learned from this? And I was thinking about, in this, Joe Manchin out of West Virginia, first of all. I think it can be said generally that over time, if you get into politics and you are close to the base, and it is the base that you speak to, it is the base that is energized, and it is the base that gets out and votes for you, then that is most of the time that's going to continue to occur. But if you leave the base, if you forsake the base, whether it's all at the same time or whether it's slowly or whether it's gradually, I think eventually you get the result of what we see here with State Representative Charlie Collins. This is just this is my just a thought here that I was hearing. Why did Joe Manchin go back to serve the people of West Virginia? because he voted the way the base wanted him to on Kavanaugh, period. I mean, that was definitely a black and white issue. You were either on the side of innocent until proven guilty, or you were not. Joe Manchin went along with the people of West Virginia and said, yeah, I believe in innocence until proven guilty. And they reelected him because of that. If you leave your base, the base is going to abandon you, not have much enthusiasm. I mean, think about this from a Donald Trump perspective. Donald Trump has not left his base. Donald Trump knows the people that elected him. And I haven't heard anybody say this. Donald Trump wins Florida, which is a bellwether for the whole country. Okay? When I say Donald Trump wins, I say, it looks like Rick Scott's going to win. It's up 30,000 votes. They're going to do a recount. The Republican DeSantis wins the governorship, right? This is in the wake of the Phantom bomber that was from Florida. A guy with the fresh pro-Trump, anti-Hillary stickers all over his van. Can you imagine if that hadn't happened, if you didn't have that nut job, right? I'm telling you right now, I think Florida would have been even worse for the Democrats. It still was pretty bad. I mean, Rick Scott's going to be the senator there, it looks like, and that's going to be a pickup. I mean, that's not a done deal. They're doing the recount or whatever. But then you got DeSantis. Then you got those congressmen that were supposed to go down in flames. They didn't, for the most part. I just think, what happens when you don't leave your base? When you don't leave your base, I mean, the people are still energized. The people are still with you. That's why the Republican Party did so well in the United States Senate. And there's a lesson to be learned from this here in Arkansas, when, and just a couple thoughts there. We're going to take a break, going to reset here. Don't go anywhere. This is Conduit News Radio. Back in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in
Attention to this important announcement. If you are one of the millions that suffer from chronic pain, joint inflammation, and nagging injuries that make it hard to enjoy your favorite activities, let me ask you, how great would it be if you could wipe out your pain in just minutes and start enjoying the things you love to do? Are you ready for a miracle?
I did. A relative made the claim to the police that this gentleman was a danger to himself or others, which is what red flag says. Police came to his door, knocked on his door. The gentleman was armed. They said, "Hey, we're here to get your guns." He initially set his weapon down and was trying to follow their instructions. At some point, it escalated. They got into a physical confrontation with the police, and they wound up shooting the gentleman. May have been justified, may not.
Who knows? It's just
I haven't seen the actual reports or the body cams or anything like that. The gentleman may in fact have been crazy. I don't know.
Right.
The bottom line is you've got a gentleman that had committed no crime, and because of this red flag law, now he's a criminal that's shot and dead.
Yeah.
And that's what it's coming to when they come to get your guns.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
On Facebook. I hate that Charlie Collins lost. The reason a lot of people are saying this is because the person that they replaced him with is like a far leftist, moms demand action, anti-Second Amendment. But Tim writes, I hate that Charlie Collins lost, but the lesson learned needs to be to keep your word, stay true to your platform, have a bedrock set of convictions, and keep your trust. Don't forget what got you there. Yeah, that's exactly right. Again, can we just listen to a little bit more of that press conference from yesterday? President Trump.
Really, it's so unrecognized how good a job they do. So we want to take care of them, and we want to hold them very close because they do a good job.
But the question, to be clear, though, the question,
Thank you very much.
why are you
sit down?
But the question, but you didn't answer my question. Just very simply, the question is, why are you pitting Americans against one another, sir?
I'm not.
Is that how you view citizens of this country?
I'll tell you what. We won a lot of elections last night. We did very well last night. And
but in many ways,
I think it's going to have a very positive impact. I watched NBC this morning. They didn't report it exactly correctly, but that's that's the fact with NBC. Nothing I can do about that. But I want this country to have protection. We want security in our country. I want security, Peter. I mean, you maybe don't think it's so important. And I think when you don't have it, you are indeed unleashing crime. I feel that.
You said you would sign an executive order on birthright citizenship. Are you still going to sign the executive order on birthright citizenship?
You'll ask me that question a little bit later. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, sure.
Thank you, Mr. President. The investigation by the special counsel Robert Mueller has been going on since last spring. It's been over your head.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been over your head, over Republicans' head, during the midterms as well. Is this an opportunity for you, Mr. President, to end that investigation? Would you consider removing Mr. Mueller from his position?
I could have ended it any time I wanted. I didn't. And there was no collusion. There was no anything. I didn't. They went after hackers in Moscow. I don't know about that. They went after people with tax problems from years ago. They went after people with loans and other things. Had nothing to do with my campaign. This is a investigation where many, many millions of dollars has been spent, and there's no collusion. It was supposed to be on collusion. There's no collusion.
All right, stop. And again, reference, the collusion that the House Intel Committee found under Republican control was collusion with the Democrats and Russia and everything else. Oh, by the way, just so everybody out there knows, I need to update you on this. State Representative Charlie Collins losing is now being blamed on Conduit. You're right. The incoming president pro temp, Jim Hendren, tweeted out that it's not a coincidence that the Arkansas county that saw the biggest Democrat gains is the county where a, quote, conservative group spends thousands of dollars attacking its own party as base. So, I mean, I haven't mentioned Charlie Collins on the air in a long time, And so that's interesting that you got to project. Maybe it's the Republicans' fault.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
You haven't done anything. How dangerous is that?
Yeah, you just got one person makes an accusation, then the judge says, go take his guns, and it's a recipe for disaster. It is a recipe for disaster where, and we've got to fight this in Arkansas. We cannot allow them to pass this.
The gentleman that actually introduced this in JPR, Letting.
Yeah.
He won.
He did. He won. He's the next senator from Fayetteville area.
So I anticipate this is going to come back next session, and yeah, we've got to mobilize against this. We cannot allow this. This is dangerous legislation. I've got to prove that I'm not going to commit a crime in the future. How do you do that? You just can't do that. My First Amendment, my Second Amendment, my Fourth Amendment, my Fifth Amendment, my Seventh Amendment, and my 14th Amendment are going to be violated with the red flag law.
That's crazy.
We can't do it.
It's absolutely crazy. All right, again, we're talking with Tim Loggins. All right, let's get to some state races. All right, so, Tim, some of the races that stood out to you, some surprises, some Republican pickups here.
We had one, Craig Christensen defeated the Democratic chair, and I'm not sure the district. I think it's 46 or 47.
Yeah.
That was a huge pickup.
John Michael Gray.
John Michael Gray lost.
Has been defeated. The Democrat chairman has been defeated. That's incredible.
That is a constitutional win. I mean, that is a win for conservatives across the state. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. That is a big one. Let me see here. I'm trying to. Where's the Secretary of State's website? Here it is. And we go down just real quick, just so you know, folks. We have Congressman Rick Crawford wins handily, 69% of the vote. French Hill winning with 51%. Arkansas, we did our job when it comes to this House situation. Congressman Steve Womack will be serving another term, as well as Congressman Bruce Westerman. If we get into the state elections here, if I can get this pulled up, we also had another interesting pickup. Democrat Chris Ritchie, I saw, lost, according to the Secretary of State's website. So Jason Dobson, who's been on this program before, Republican, turning that, what was a blue district, turning that red. It seems like there were a lot of people that just voted Republican straight down the ticket.
There was something of a red wave in Arkansas, and that race you're talking about is actually a very seminal race as far as seniority in the House. It's going to have huge implications down the road for some of our good conservatives here in Northeast Arkansas.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. We have, you have some Democrats holding the line, let's see, David Fielding went ahead and he did win his race against the Republican challenger Wade Andrews. You have this Democrat Don Glover winning in House District 11, and that was where Ricky Lattimore and I think the incumbent who was running as an independent, Mark McElroy, were running. It looks like Mark McElroy, and Ricky Lattimore certainly ended up those two running, they ended up enabling the Democrat to take that seat.
They split the vote.
Yeah, they split the vote, yeah. But, yeah, here's that State Representative District 12. This is the Jason Dobson race, and Representative Chris Ritchie, the Democrat losing this, 61% cast their vote for the Republican Jason Dobson. That's huge.
That's huge. It is.
Yeah, yeah.
Just want to say, in Northeast Arkansas, Patriots are pretty pleased with the outcome of these elections. We had one that we knew was coming that I would say is not a victory for gun rights, Senate District 19. But it is what it is.
You mean with James Sturch, yeah.
James Sturch winning, he's not a friend of gun rights. But overall in Northeast Arkansas, we picked up some real friends of gun rights and gun laws, and we held the line on those that we needed to hold. Joe Jett, he's come to 3 or 4 of our meetings in Northeast Arkansas. That was a win. He had a very liberal opponent that was in favor of assault weapons ban and red flag. And Scott Baltz. Mm-hmm. I know he's a Democrat, but he's come to our meetings. He interacts with us. Had a lot of conversations with him, and he won over Marsh Davis narrowly. Mm-hmm. But you know what? That's a win for Patriots because Scott's pledged constitutional care and he won't vote against it. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, when it comes to focusing on that one issue, I mean, that's you guys are extremely effective at that. Here it is again, folks. Representative Michael John Gray. here in Arkansas, the Democrat chairman of the Republican Party, of the Democrat Party, losing to a challenger, Craig Christensen, with 50.68% to his 49.32%. That is...
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. We really appreciate you being with us this morning. Got a special treat for you. Please welcome to the program for the first time. We have conservative author, historian, his Mr. Jay Cost is on the line. Jay, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yes, my audience is going to know who you are just because I've referenced your book several times on the air over the last couple of years. One of my favorites, it's called A Republic No More, Big Government and the Rise of American Political Corruption. I'm going to show it to him on the screen here, Jay. I especially love the very beginning where we talk about legal graft. We cover a lot of that on the program about how when the government does something, it's somehow legal, but if you and I were to do it, it might be illegal or unethical. Just talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, usually when we think about corruption, we think of money in a brown paper bag, or we think maybe about Abscam. I don't know if any of your listeners remember Abscam from the early 80s. It's shakedown by the government dressed as Arab sheiks. That's usually what we think about. But I think that we should understand corruption more broadly. Is really anytime corruption happens when the government plays favorites in a way that doesn't benefit the whole country. And I think, in the course of researching and writing The Republic No More, one of the things that I found was that the government tends to play favorites with people who are wealthy and well-connected. I mean, nowadays we associate, well, if you want to help the poor, you're in favor of big government. But I think that big government just as often helps the wealthy and the well-connected who are able to basically use their political power to line their own pockets, really at the expense of the taxpayers.
That's exactly right. And matter of fact, I've got on your Twitter, I'm going to pull that up here. We're talking with Jay Cost. He is a conservative author, historian. You've also probably read about him, the National Review. The Price of Greatness. This is another book. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and the Creation of the American Oligarchy. So this wealthy class that can benefit from big government, is that kind of the American oligarchy that you write about in The Price of Greatness?
Yes, the book is sort of an early history of the rise of the wealthy and their role in public policy. Oligarchy is basically derived from the Greek, basically means the rule of the rich. And that book is about how Hamilton wanted to rechannel the self-interest of the wealthy for the sake of the national good, which was a very smart plan. I mean, the book isn't pro-Hamilton or anti-Hamilton or pro-Madison, anti-Madison. Hamilton had a really brilliant idea about recognizing that the wealthy were going to make a bet on the future of the United States, and he wanted to make sure public policy was designed in a way that the wealthy would bet on their success. But Madison observed this problem, which was that when we bring the wealthy into, we want to make it, yoke the interests of the wealthy toward the public good. It's actually a two-way street. One of the problems that happened in the early days of our government was public policy got retooled in important ways to benefit the wealthy. And this is actually what brought about the first political parties that we had in our country between the Federalists and the Republicans.
So to kind of conceptualize this, when we hear the phrase now of draining the swamp, and, there does seem to be, predictably so, an allergy to doing this, I guess, to say it lightly, where people don't, they don't want the gravy train of government. There's a lot of money to be made off of a big government. Do you see that shifting at all in what we've seen President Trump attempt to do, or even some of the things that he's done? There's this giant pushback against what he's trying to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do. I haven't seen any real movement. And I think, it's important to bear in mind that the status quo in Washington, if we say it's corrupt, which I think it is, it nevertheless benefits lots and lots of people. And they're not going to let things change willingly. It requires constant effort from voters and constant pressure. Voters to demand that Washington behave more responsibly. And that is something that I don't think we really see. Where, we usually think of political corruption as this separate issue from like health care or taxes or, energy policy. But I think that political corruption is a problem that informs all of our other public policy problems. And in a lot of respects, I think it's almost the first problem in government. And I think that as long as we continue to see corruption as a separate issue, it's always going to be, first of all, corruption is always going to hang around. Question is whether or not it's become intolerable. I think it has. I think the challenge is that voters don't prioritize it as an issue. And unfortunately, we saw this in New Jersey last night, right? Bob Menendez was censured by the Senate for basically being corrupt. And he won re-election easily last night. It just sends a message to everybody in Washington, D.C. that, hey, you can get away with this stuff.
Yeah, and it's very, very discouraging. And I noticed, when you said that corruption will always be around, and that's part of the human condition, right? And I think that's why our founding fathers, they counted on the fallibility of man, and that's why they created the Constitution to put limits on those with the power. But if corruption is something that is always going to be around, to me, that would then necessitate a limited government. It would necessitate trying to make sure that the government stays as small and confined in its role as possible. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. The larger the government, the more opportunities there are for corruption. The more capacity the government has to make winners and losers, which is really what we're talking about. The larger the government gets, the more money that it has control over, the more it can make or destroy fortunes, right? So that's going to create more incentives for people to lobby the government to make sure that they make them rich or keep them from the poorhouse, right? This is just the danger of an expansive government. One of the most corrupt governments in the 20th century was the Soviet Union, which is a totalitarian government.
Can I get we're talking with Jay Cost, who's a conservative author. He's a historian. From a historian standpoint, last night, the midterm elections, were you surprised at all at the outcomes?
I was a little surprised. I did not expect the Republicans to do as well as they did in the Senate. From the looks of it right now, the Republicans are going to pick up a net of 3 seats, which is more than pretty much all the major race handicappers had estimated. Their losses in the House were about in line with historical projections. So I think that it wasn't a slam dunk for Democrats, which, a lot of people were expecting. I think that as midterms go, it was pretty middle of the road, which I think maybe was a surprise because I think people were sort of expecting a major rebuke to President Trump, and I don't think that we saw that last night. Florida is the quintessential swing state, and here it voted out a Democrat senator and elected another Republican governor.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that as a rebuke, So I think that it's and also I would add that, we're back to divided government, which has been the norm in American history since the end of World War II, really. Most of the time since Harry Truman left office in 1952 has been spent with the two parties sharing power one way or the other.
Yeah, that is true, and I agree with what you're saying about the not having some sort of mandate here, where President Trump or what the Republicans have been doing has been rejected. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there, Republican voters, they turned out just because of the results. You have the Supreme Court, for example. I mean, I think the Brett Kavanaugh hearings really motivated the right. That seems to be kind of the consensus. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think that probably gave a spur to, especially in the redder states, Missouri, North Dakota, Indiana, Montana, which the Democrats nearly lost and was really a sleeper race. I think that Republicans are probably kicking themselves for not investing more in Montana. But all of those states had Democrat senators who voted against Kavanaugh. And all of them lost or very narrowly lost, in Florida too. But West Virginia, which is now one of the most pro-Trump, actually I would say West Virginia is the most pro-Trump state in the country, reelected their Democratic senator, Joe Manchin, who also, not coincidentally I think, was the only Democrat to vote for Kavanaugh. So it's pretty strong evidence, circumstantial, but it's pretty strong evidence that made a difference last night.
So last week we have a whiteboard in the studio, and I put some slogan on it once a week. And last week it was just "If you can keep it," and it was obviously referencing what you've written about Benjamin Franklin's response to the question. What did you give us? And a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. Back to the book that I really, really enjoy about corruption. And by the way, A Republic No More, I especially love the fact of the illustration on the front. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this illustration, wasn't this like a piece of campaign rhetoric when we were trying to abolish the state legislature from electing senators and instead move to the popular vote?
Yeah, that's actually, it's from Puck Magazine in 1905, and it's sort of a criticism of the machine style of politics that had really become very pronounced in the North. And so
as I look at this, Jay, I just think to myself, I mean, it really, if you didn't know the era it was from, it would still fit in right now. It fits in perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I picked it as my. I was looking around at, when I was getting the book ready, and I was looking around for uncopyrighted historical photographs. I couldn't believe my good fortune for finding something that fits the thesis of the book so perfectly.
That's great. Right here, just in the fold, this book argues we couldn't, meaning we couldn't keep the republic. Just talk briefly a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately the problem is that we have a government that was designed to exercise limited powers. And that was the design of it. When you think about the structure of the Senate, the structure of the House, the presidency, right, it was designed to handle certain enumerated powers. Right? But now we have a government that, in effect, can do anything that it wants. But it wasn't designed to do that. It wasn't designed to handle unlimited power. And the argument of my book is that the structure of our government does not fit. It's not a good fit for the powers it wields. I mean, it's almost like, imagine building, like if you're going to build a house, you're going to dig a foundation for your house, for a 2-story house. But you wouldn't add, 10 more stories on a building that his house is only built for 2 stories, the foundation is. Sort of the same thing with our government. Our government was originally designed to handle a small amount of power. We just kept adding power upon power upon power to it, and it doesn't handle it responsibly. And so we don't have a republic, right, which, as Lincoln said, is the government that's supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. We have something that's closer to what in the book I call an interest group democracy, where it's really a matter of groups grasping for whatever spoils they can get from the government.
Let me ask you this, is kind of our last question here. Do you think you mentioned earlier that you don't really see any huge movements when it comes to draining the swamp? Do you think that's because maybe some of the substance that President Trump is attempting to do isn't happening, or do you think the system resisted because of his style? Potentially, that you hear a lot of people say, well, really like what's happening, but yeah, sometimes I don't always agree with the approach or that sort of thing. What are your thoughts about what's going on right now?
I think that the real problem is, frankly, President Trump's "drain the swamp" is a great line, but where's the policy that he's put behind it? And when did he put forward some genuine reform effort to clean out the influence of interest groups? What's the legislation? I didn't see anything like that, and he didn't stake it. Presidents, when they get elected, they can only really get a couple things done. So this is what I'm doing. I'm going all in on this, right? George Bush did tax cuts, and Obama did Obamacare. Trump decided to do tax cuts. He didn't push all in on, let's drain the swamp. And I think that that's really kind of been the problem, which is, and frankly, a lot of presidents do the same thing. They campaign against Washington, but then they get there, and then what policies are they proposing that are going to fix Washington? What's the legislation that he's introduced in Congress? I haven't seen anything. I think that's the real problem, to be honest. His rhetorical style is what it is. It's worked for him. It was a problem for House Republicans last night, but not for Senate Republicans.
True.
But I'm just trying to think, where has he actually said, okay, here is my Drain the Swamp Act of 2018? What was it? I haven't seen anything.
So what's the hatred? Where's the hatred coming from then? What is he doing to provoke the hatred?
Well, look, I think Trump is making manifest certain cultural divisions that exist in our subtext, in our cultural subtext. Look, and I think bottom line, when you get right down to it, the people who hate Trump look at him and think this is not the type of guy who should be in charge. The type of guy who should be in charge is one of our guys. I think it's really as simple as that when you get right down to it. That a guy like Trump is just not the type of guy who's supposed to be in charge of the country. It's supposed to be a guy like Obama or a guy like Romney or a guy like Bush, right? He's the wrong type. Almost. Trump plays political hardball, but I think Obama played political hardball too. But Obama just phrased his hardballs. He just phrased it in a way that appealed to the people that Trump that they just hate Trump. Like Obama said, substance of not a lot of what Obama said was very similar to the substance of what Trump is saying. Like the sort of stuff Obama would say about Fox News, Trump says about CNN. From a substantive perspective.
Yeah.
But Trump says it in a way that just upsets these people, and it upsets the editorial pages of the New York Times.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it is. I think the editorial page of the New York Times thinks that a guy like Donald Trump has no business being president.
I think I definitely agree with you there, Jay Cost. And it's been a privilege to get to interview you, sir. I love your writings. I love your book. And hopefully we can do it again sometime. And really appreciate you coming on this morning.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. This was a great interview. I appreciate your time.
All righty. Jay Cost, everybody.
A huge disappointment for the Democrats here in Arkansas.
I will say this. Craig came to our meet and greet down in Newport. He spoke at it. We probably had 65 folks there. Michael John did not come. And I'm not going to say that had anything to do with the outcome, but you know what? You can take whatever you want to from that.
Yeah.
Craig lost by 50 votes in Jackson County, which is a Democrat county. So I'm pretty tickled with Craig's race there.
Yeah. No doubt. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. It looks like things worked out really well for the most part. There was one up in northwest Arkansas.
I saw that.
State Representative Charlie Collins being defeated, which I thought was interesting. Of course, it is a more liberal area, up in that neck of the woods, or a part of Fayetteville there. What were your thoughts on that? Charlie Collins. The leftist media, they're spinning the Charlie Collins laws as saying the man who authored the gun bill, the college gun bill, defeated.
I would have a different take from that, Paul, and I think I can look at national elections and kind of take that and apply it to the state races.
Bob Maloney here with a developing story from ASA News, The Parrot. China is coming to Arkansas. We go live to the press conference where the Communist Chinese executive is addressing Arkansans for the first time. Let's listen into the translator.
On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, we invite you to come and visit the newest named city in Arkansas, China, Delphia. We are very pleased to own an American city. Our communist government is proud to do business with the mediocre state of Arkansas. We are happy to take your money and your trees and send the profits back home. The Communist government of China was pleased to learn the taxpayers of Arkansas are excited to contribute their money with the hope, if you build it, one day jobs will come. We are excited to take your fields of capitalism and turn them into fields of communism, where every Arkansan has nightly dreams of Mao. China is looking forward to our investment of $1 billion in what is now called Arkansas. We see this as an investment in our future, and that future will be called New Beijing. Chinese investment will make Arkansas a great place for jobs, as the People's Republic of China will succeed where the Soviets failed. As we build our roots deep in Arkansas, we are thrilled with the potential new ideas and advancement we will share with our people back home. Soon we will have the world's largest runway in the South China Sea, and we thank Arkansas for contributing to our noble cause. In closing, once we make China great again, all of you will see the glory of the revolution of Mao. And Arkansas, whatever you do, please never call the FBI.
Paul Harrell, Parrot.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. 870-275-9799. We're going to be talking with author and conservative Mr. Dan Perkins when we come back at the bottom of the next hour. We're just going to be talking generally midterm fallout. What were people's motivations? Were the motivations... were they legitimate? Who stands to gain, lose, going forward at this point? In the first hour, we talked to you about how interesting it really is that the Democrat Party barely had any time at all to gloat about winning the House, because they immediately reminded the American people what the next 2 years are really going to be like, because their reaction to the resignation of Jeff Sessions was, we've got to protect the Mueller investigation at all costs because Donald Trump's a KGB agent. So they don't even get to, have a full 24-hour news cycle of bragging about how they took back the House from the evil Republicans, because they immediately start saying, Russia collusion, Russia collusion. I don't know if that was planned like that or not, but that's certainly what's happening. So welcome to the next 2 years. This is what it's going to be like. It's going to be the Kavanaugh hearings all over again. It's going to be a time of unrest, a time of strife. This is my feeling, my projection. There's going to be traps that are set for Donald Trump, but they're not even going to try to conceal them, just like the Kavanaugh situation. It's going to be blatant. It won't even be done in secret, and it's going to, I think, really remind the country just how sick and tired they were of, people like Nancy Pelosi and others. At the same time, terrible tragedy in California. 12 are dead in a California bar shooting. Still waiting on more details about that. But our thoughts and our prayers are with our countrymen from California. The officer who was killed going into the line of fire. The gunman is dead, according to reports. We'll be back in just a moment. A huge disappointment for the Democrats here in Arkansas.
I will say this. Craig came to our meet and greet down in Newport. He spoke at it. We probably had 65 folks there. Michael John did not come. And I'm not going to say that had anything to do with the outcome, but you know what? You can take whatever you want to from that.
Yeah.
Craig lost by 50 votes in Jackson County, which is a Democrat county. So I'm pretty tickled with Craig's race there.
Yeah. No doubt. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. It looks like things worked out really well for the most part. There was one up in northwest Arkansas.
I saw that.
State Representative Charlie Collins being defeated, which I thought was interesting. Of course, it is a more liberal area up in that neck of the woods, or a part of Fayetteville there. What were your thoughts on that? Charlie Collins. The leftist media, they're spinning the Charlie Collins loss as saying the man who authored the gun bill, the college gun bill, defeated.
I would have a different take from that, Paul, and I think I can look at national elections and kind of take that and apply it to the state races. Mm-hmm. Charlie Collins did author the campus carry bill, but he also went along with all of the infringements that came with it from the governor's nephew and the governor. He didn't come out strong on conservative principles, although he was fairly conservative. He didn't make that strong stand. You look at Dan Sullivan, you look at Brant Smith, you look at conservatives that aren't compromising. They won. Okay, you've got some around the state that weren't necessarily hardline conservative, and they were willing to compromise the principles on different issues. Democrats beat them. You can't beat a Democrat trying to be moderate.
That you could maybe even take that, extrapolate that out to the national races
Absolutely.
As well. If you're just joining us, the Republicans did lose the House of Representatives. They made gains in the Senate nationally, which is incredible. The Senate's looking great and more conservative than ever. But some of these House members that lost, some are saying, nationally, some of these House members that lost, they were kind of some of these types of Republicans that feel like they have to apologize for the president constantly.
I would say that nationally, Paul, the never Trumpers, they lost big. President Trump won. Now, the never Trumpers, okay, when you apologize for your beliefs and your convictions, you have difficulty convincing folks to vote for you.
Yeah.
That's what it really boils down to.
Yeah, I think generally that's true. I think if you're President Trump this morning, you've got to be happy with the way the statewide races went, because it looks like if President Trump were to have run for re-election last night, he would have won Florida.
Absolutely.
In these other big states.
So. It was.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, I'm back, folks. Sound off over at the Facebook page, facebook.com/Conduit News. Or you can send me a text or phone call, 870-59799. Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. I haven't talked to him in a while. He's a foreign policy contributor to the dailycaller.com. You've read his stuff over at liveset.com, newsmax.com, thehill.com. Mr. Dan Perkins joins us again. Dan, welcome back, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on, Paul.
Yes, sir. The midterm elections, the fallout, just let's get your take generally on what happened on Tuesday.
I think it was a significant victory for the Republican Party in that the number of House seats lost was the lowest since the Second World War. And we had unprecedented, I think we have to go back to 1932 to find more Republicans who retired at one time from the Congress, 44, I think, So we had 44 Republicans not standing for re-election, and the last thing I saw was about a net gain of about 25 for the Democrats. So clearly not anywhere near a blue wave. They picked up more seats in the Senate, and the people who are reporting that the Democrats are now in control of the agenda are not looking at things through the right pair of lenses. Everything starts in the House in terms of most of the time legislation is initiated in the House, but then it has to go to the Senate and it has to go to the President. You now have probably 54, maybe 55 Republican senators in the Senate, and all we have to do is go back and look at Harry Reid. We had over 200 occasions where the House, the Republican-controlled House, sent bills to the Senate on replace of Obamacare, and none of them ever even made it to committee.
Yeah.
So the idea that they're going to somehow change the agenda is an overstatement by the mainstream media, not being realistic about what's going on. There's talk about, well, they're going to start subpoenaing and holding hearings and all these things. The Democrats they have a very slim majority, and they have to be careful because they've got less than 2 years now before the next general election. And if they come across, because of all their hearings and subpoenas and all this stuff, of not really doing anything for the American people, but focusing on trying to figure out a way to remove Donald Trump from office, they're going to have a short life of chairmanships.
Yeah, the majority leader, Mitch McConnell in the Senate, he was asked something along those lines, and he said, listen, I was in the House in the 90s, and we tried this presidential harassment, and the President Clinton at the time, his numbers went through the roof when we impeached him, and our numbers just kept getting lower and lower. So I would strongly recommend to the Democrats to not go down that path. It was interesting, Dan Perkins, that the Democrats really didn't even get a chance to gloat yesterday because of the resignation of Jeff Sessions. It sent them into a frenzy, and they were running to podiums trying to remind everybody of Russia collusion. I thought that was an interesting twist in all of this.
I had written months ago that I felt that that the president was, in fact, going to either ask for Jeff Sessions' resignation or be fired shortly after the midterms. He really put the president in a terrible box shortly after being selected or approved by the Senate when he recused himself and created the opportunity for Mueller to come in. So that was a really serious blow to the president. So I think that the new, even the acting attorney general, is already more aggressive than Sessions. But I felt that after the election, whatever the election results were going to be, wasn't going to change the president's mind. Sessions was going to go. But he was going to look for an attorney general. And I think that one of the things, or two of the things that he's going to do when he gets the new permanent attorney general, is reopening the investigation in the Clinton email. And number two, he's going to look at the Clinton Foundation. And he may not do anything relative to Mueller. Let Mr. Mueller go ahead and do what he's going to do. But the risk of the Democratic Party of what could be disclosed into an email scandal, which could bring in the president, Barack Obama, and Hillary in very serious problems, and then the Clinton Foundation and their questionable activities. I've done a lot of work on the Clinton Foundation, so there's a lot of exposure for the Democratic Party. And what Trump was basically saying to them yesterday, you go there, we're going to go there too.
Yeah.
And what they forgot is that the Senate has the same powers of oversight that the House does, and they can go the opposite direction of what the House is going to do.
That's exactly right. We're talking with Dan Perkins. Now, as your expertise, Dan, is foreign policy, you'd mentioned the Clinton Foundation, and just how bad is it? I mean, that certainly taking these international contributions and things like that. And why do you think it's one thing for Sessions to recuse from the Mueller investigation, but it's another thing that he really does. At least we don't know for sure, but it doesn't seem like he really pursued the Clinton Foundation or the emails, the email scandal. Why do you think that is?
Sometimes, I know this is going to sound terrible, but I can't think of any other way to say it. Sometimes good people are in the wrong position. And I think that Mr. Sessions is basically a very honest and decent man. And I think that when he found him, he was, in my opinion, he was manipulated by the Democrats to recuse himself. And I think he realized that much later. I think he's an honest man. I think he's a moral man, and I think that he got played by the Democratic Party, and was put in a position where he was reluctant, because if he did anything, it would be perceived that he was dishonest or not truthful or whatever they wanted to say about him. So he, in essence, neutralized himself not only on the Russia situation, but I think that he was then compromised to the point that he couldn't really do anything that would smack of attacking the Clintons or going after the Clintons or Barack Obama. So that's why he passed on the email and on the Clinton Foundation. And one of the things that I discovered when I was doing my research, and this is a situation that a lot of people don't know about, there wasn't just one Clinton Foundation. There were 9 Clinton Foundations all over the world. Wow. And money was channeled among those, and they came into the United States and went other ways. So they had to the best that I could find, where in countries where a Clinton Foundation had been established. I'm not saying there weren't more, but I was able to identify at least 9, and these were set up very unsupervised. They even admitted they were not properly supervised. So I think that's something that I'm hopeful that the new Attorney General will look at both of them, but for totally different reasons. The email scandal is, in fact, our national security was jeopardized, and nobody paid a price for making the decision to jeopardize our national security.
Yeah, the reports say that on that secure server, the reports say that the Chinese basically were able to see what Hillary Clinton was reading in real time.
I don't doubt that. I mean, it was not by any way, shape, or form any kind of a sophisticated cybersecurity system, and not anywhere near as secure as the government. I just think that what we have is, I also believe that somewhere out there, all the deleted emails are somewhere. I don't know who's got them, but maybe with this open investigation we'll get them, and we're going to find a lot of things about the Clintons that will not be very flattering and may in fact be criminal, and may damage the reputations of some very prominent Democrats.
Interesting. We're talking with Dan Perkins. By the way, he's the author of the book, The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, which is a series. You can check that out, find it on Amazon. But you've also seen him, his posts on the Daily Caller, LifeSet, Clash Daily, The Hill, Newsmax. Dan, real quick, before we go, Florida.
Yes,
I was
my state.
So you're from Florida. Okay, good. So I was very much surprised. I mean, the early vote, we had Larry Schweikert on, who was doing some amazing work with the early voting numbers in terms of how the polls couldn't possibly be realistic when you look at how many more Republicans were turning out versus Democrats in the early voting numbers, specifically in Florida. And, of course, it worked out good. The Republican gubernatorial, the governorship is going to stay a Republican. Looks like Rick Scott, I think he had a 30,000 vote lead. Are they going to do a recount? Is that what they're going to do?
Yeah, they're talking. There's the Democratic challenger is thinking he wants to have a recount, but that's okay.
Yeah. So my point is that Florida's the bellwether, and it looks like President Trump he's still popular there. Is what I'm trying to say, and that's got to be worrisome for the Democrats.
Yes, and there's another thing that you have to put into the equation when you think about early voting. And we'll deal with the governorship's race, Andrew Gillum. A lot of people voted early. A lot of people voted before, and this is a criticism of early voting. A lot of people voted before the corruption scandal came out about Gillum and the money that he was taking from developers and contractors, thousands upon thousands of dollars in his pocket. So that those people who voted early, when Gillum was supposedly up in the polls, were in a situation that they couldn't change their vote.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the criticisms that I have of early voting. I understand it makes it easier for people to vote, but I also believe that there is a natural ebb and flow of things that happen in political campaigns. And if you vote too early, you may not really have a true picture of the candidate that you're voting for.
Yeah.
And in Florida, the fact that the Gillum stuff was suppressed for a long time and not really widely circulated in the local media, what we had is a situation where people then had buyer's remorse, but there wasn't anything they could do about it. So we have to be very careful about how much when I went to the polls on Tuesday, when I went to the presidential election, I had to wait in line like 3 hours. I walked in on Tuesday. Now, I understand that midterms are less popular than general elections, but I think we have to be careful to not overinterpret the Gillum vote, because if the people who voted early were aware of his corruption, they may not have voted for him, and the loss would have been much wider.
I think that's a good point. I also would point out, Dan, that the bomber, or I guess the non-bomber bomber, was from Florida. They arrested him in Florida, and the fact that didn't have an impact in terms of turning the state blue, I thought is very interesting. I mean, I think the lead would have probably been, it would have been a bigger margin of victory for the Republicans, had that wacko not, mailed all those pipe bombs or not
fake bombs.
Fake bombs. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There are some people who think that that America figured out fairly quickly that this was a stunt, that there was nobody really in danger. The bomb or bomb-like devices never made it anywhere near any of the intended targets. They were all intercepted by the Department of Postal Service. So it was almost a non-event, and it made headlines, but it didn't have an impact, I don't think, on the election. I think Kavanaugh had, in his treatment, had more of an impact on the election, especially with women, than the fake pipe bomb. Because I think.
Last question. Where do you think we go from here? We have Antifa publishing the addresses of Van Coulter and others, Sean Hannity. We now have mobs outside of Tucker Carlson's house. Do you think you mentioned Kavanaugh? I mean, are we basically going to have this environment, Kavanaugh and the Antifa, just feeling emboldened for the next 2 years? Is that what we're facing here?
Well, that's a great question, and I would respond to you by saying what we're going to do is we're going to find out, now that the Democratic Party is no longer resistant, now that the Democratic Party has control of at least a portion of the government, the House of Representatives, what they do to quell this. If they don't do anything to stop the violence, then they're culpable. So I think that's the thing we've got to watch is to see whether or not, once they're in power, do they control the Antifas of the world, or do they just let them go shotgun wild? And that's one of the things we got to watch for.
Dan Perkins, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate it, folks. Look for his stuff at the Daily Caller, LifeSet, Newsmax.com, TheHill.com, and his book, The Brotherhood of the Red Nile. Dan, I hope you have a great day, sir. Thank you so much.
thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
All righty. Dan Perkins, everybody. Folks, we're going to take a break, reset here, wrap things up. Don't go anywhere. Phone number 870-275-9799. Sound off over at the Facebook page, facebook.com/Conduit News. And right now, if you want to know how everything shook out in Arkansas, go to conduitnews.com and click on the article on the front page. It's the full Arkansas election results from the midterms. Check it out, and you can kind of figure out how everything went down. We're going to take a break. Back in a minute.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Red victory in the Senate, definitely. It was a red wave in Arkansas, and that's a mixed bag, by the way. But that's okay. We held the line. Arkansas did its part. From a Patriots perspective, Paul, we're pretty pleased with most of the outcomes. Our membership is still growing. Our interaction with these elected officials is still growing. We're having meetings all over the state. We got elected folks coming to these meetings. We got one this Saturday down in Fordyce. Northwest Arkansas just had one last weekend. Okay. We're making a difference one election at a time, one politician at a time, one town at a time. We have these things like Forest City that's bringing attention to us. And I hate it for that gentleman in Forest City, but you know what? That's going to open some folks' eyes in these towns. You got to stand up for your rights.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a good outcome eventually for citizens of Arkansas.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anytime you have an incident, it is an opportunity to educate, and so that's very important there.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I think it's very bad for our country, I will tell you. I think it's a shame. And a poll came out today, by the way, from NBC, or at least I saw it on NBC, where a majority of the people do not agree with the Mueller investigation, or it wasn't approved. They have approval and disapproval, and it had a much higher disapproval. It should end because it's very bad for our country.
So if it's bad,
and I'm not just talking about the tremendous expense. And the other thing is they should look at the other side also. They only look at one side. They're not looking at all of the things that came up during this investigation.
Interesting.
They don't do that. They should also get people that can be fair, not 13 or 14 or 17. I call them the angry Democrats. They are angry people. And it's a very unfair thing for this country. It's a very, very, forget about unfair to me, it's very bad for our country.
Okay. So, Mr. President, if it's
Go ahead.
Mr. President, just wait,
Please.
just a moment. If it's unfair to the country and it's costing millions of dollars, why don't you just
give him the
end
mic,
it?
please? I've answered the question. Okay. Go ahead, take the. Well, I'll give you I will give you voter suppression. You just have to sit down, please. Sit down. I didn't call you. I didn't call you. I'll give you voter suppression. Take a look at the CNN polls, how inaccurate they were. That's called voter suppression. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm not responding. I'm responding to. Excuse me. I'm not responding to you. I'm talking to this gentleman. Will you please sit down? Excuse me. Would you please sit down? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now that the House of Representatives
very hostile.
has
It's such a hostile media. It's so sad. You ask me about. No, you rudely interrupted him. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do your demands remain the same to the United States Congress on immigration in exchange for a DACA fix, in exchange for an amnesty for 1.7 million?
All right, so that's President Trump yesterday. We covered some of the press conference in the first hour of the program. If you missed it, you can go get it there over at conduitnews.com. But I wanted to make sure we got that clip in as well. We didn't get it in the first hour. When he said it is a hostile press, it's only going to get worse. It's going to get much, much worse. Yeah, he is. Joe's like, he's like a school teacher. I didn't call on you. He said, yeah, he is like, he's like a school teacher in the environment where, you know, parents aren't disciplining their kids anymore and they're relying on the teachers to do it. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely, and of course they revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials at the White House because he wouldn't give the microphone up to a White House intern. And apparently put his hands on her in some way, trying to, you know, they had to wrestle the microphone away from Jim Acosta. Anyway, CNN's making a big, we stand by our people. We stand by our anchors. Folks, today I'm going to be in Conway at 12 o'clock at Larry's Pizza. I'm going to be speaking to the group there, the Tea Party group there that meets on Thursdays at noon. So come by, say hi at Larry's Pizza in Conway. I'd love to meet you. Come become part of a great grassroots organization and have some good pizza. And the Larry's Pizza it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not good for my waistline. So I always say I'm going to try to have a salad there, but that's probably not going to happen. So that's coming up today at 12 o'clock at Larry's Pizza in Conway. So always good to see the good folks of Faulkner County. Tomorrow on the program, I want to talk a little bit about this article. Doug Thompson wrote 4 days ago in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette that the size of state grants is what spurred the investigation that led to the conviction in the Arkansas corruption scandal surrounding Ecclesia College. They quote the Western District Attorney, U.S. Attorney Dak Keese. Quote, there's no proof to this, but if John Woods, convicted felon John Woods, former senator, Republican, if he had kept the funds low, like $50,000 a year, where he was getting maybe a $10,000 or a $15,000 kickback a year, I don't think we would have ever caught it, Keese said of the kickbacks from Ecclesia College. The investigation uncovered a multi-million-dollar bribery scheme involving Medicaid that has nothing to do with Ecclesia College, he said. The investigation into the scandal spread to other states, mainly to Missouri, and is not done yet, he said. He gave no details other than a rough date regarding the coming development. So there's more coming. Quote, I can't tell you what it is, but I think that will be the first of the year, January. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's a safe guesstimate. And then Doug Thompson reports the investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office into Ecclesia is now closed, which I still have a lot of questions for Ecclesia College and how some of that money was spent. And but as far as the U.S. District Attorney is concerned, their investigation into Ecclesia is now closed, but the ongoing investigation that led into this giant Medicaid fraud, which, the linchpin is this guy named Milton Russell Rusty Cranford, Milty Cranford, who tried to have a guy killed in New Jersey because he was going to testify against him. Then he copped a plea after they arrested him with $17,000 in cash and a revolver on him. Arkansas, be safe.